Hi, Alex here with Reality Checks on MGTOW. This is my take on MGTOW, an introduction. So, the Reality Checks on MGTOW channel attempts to answer the question, can we believe in the MGTOW account of reality? Or to put it another way, is what MGTOW says about the nature of women and the nature of relationships between men and women a credible account? I've only recently come across MGTOW while I was searching for material on postmodernism and social constructivism. The first thing I found was Marcus's post on Feminist Epistemology Part 2, Standpoint Theory. I was so impressed that I stayed listening to several other postings from Groundwork for the Metaphysics of MGTOW. Discovering a community that talks intelligently about relationships is refreshing, although naturally I don't necessarily agree with it all. So I started to wonder, exactly what did I agree with and what didn't I? And how would I differentiate between the two? A couple of approaches immediately came to mind. First, a case study based on my own experience. I'll kick that off with the next post. Second, a review of the scientific literature to see whether some of the propositions put forward by the MGTOW community held water from an empirical point of view. Does the data support the claims? That'll be in subsequent posts. Now, Marcus contributes many philosophical positions that may be broader than just relationships with women. So before I begin, I'll explain where I'm coming from epistemologically, just to be clear. It's not that I have a fixed position, it's just a reflection on the way that I seem to look at things. And it's not particularly unusual, but it is layered and a bit complicated. A lot of it is to do with being pragmatic in the face of uncertainty. Skip to the next post if this philosophy bit doesn't interest you. So, the position is one of underlying skepticism, but taking the pragmatic position that for the sake of good debate, we can use coherentism as a basis for navigating towards models of reality. I favour two primary methods of establishing coherence. The scientific method, either loosely or stringently applied to our own experience as a way of establishing facts that are really just strong beliefs, i.e. some pegs in the ground, but pegs that can be moved in the light of evidence and experience, and methods of making inferences based on logic and maths, but again either loosely or stringently applied, and often subject to bias and error. This allows us to make inferences from any fact, assumption or premise that's part of our belief system, identify inconsistencies, and establish coherence. However, the ways in which we categorize and communicate about reality is to some extent arbitrary. Although we evaluate the truth of a belief through its coherence with other beliefs, this coherence can be socially constructed in the moment and apply to quite small and transient belief systems as well as entire systems of belief, i.e. science, religion, feminism, MGTOW, capitalism, or whatever. Part of this philosophy concerns how we each, as individuals, come to look at the world and how this is grounded in our experience. Our experience is the data on which we perform our scientific analysis of what's going on. This idea was set out by George Kelly in 1955 and is called personal construct theory. This all looks a bit of a mishmash, but I think it hangs together. Here's another attempt to say the same thing. Nothing can be known, but for pragmatic reasons, we use the method of science and logic to construct coherent models of reality. But the categories and languages we use for our scientific and logical classifications is somewhat arbitrary. So we can use different classifications if we like, but still use science and logic to establish coherence. We don't require complete coherence across all our beliefs, although we might strive in that direction. So, again, for pragmatic reasons, we can construct transient bubbles of coherence, both in our own minds and between us when we communicate. Again, for pragmatic reasons, it's often too time-consuming and resource-consuming to work out coherent bubbles of belief. We tend to borrow those already formed by people we trust and tweak these as necessary to achieve what we want. Whose bubbles we run with is a factor in determining the power dynamics between us. I would like to explain the term somewhat arbitrary as applying to our classification system and the terms in our language. This is best explained by the notion of the Umwelt. This is defined in ethology as the world as it is experienced by a particular organism. A person will see the world through eyes, ears, and other senses. A bat will experience a somewhat different world through the use of echo sounding. Similarly, a bee will have quite a different experience. So will a scientist looking at the world through some specialized equipment, for example an infrared camera. All these actors are looking at the same world, but through entirely different filters. This is called their Umwelt. Having a different Umwelt will mean that distinctions, that's categories, by which an actor understands the world will be different, and if that actor had language, the language would name different things, the nouns, and describe different transitions in state, i.e. the verbs. However, there will still be regularities in the different Umwelts. Certain phenomena will occur together, or one after the other, perhaps implying cause and effect. The bat, for example, will hear back a similar pattern of sounds to the ones emitted, but with subtle changes to it. The formation of the systems of categorization will be affected by the evolution and learning, that is the hereditary and environment, of the actor in its particular Umwelt. So while the experience of an actor will be determined by the in principle arbitrary filters it has on its experience of the world, it will still be able to build coherent systems of belief. Hence these systems are somewhat arbitrary, because an actor's Umwelt could be conceivably tuned in any way, but if they stay tuned that way, they will still be able to search for patterns and create coherent systems of belief about the world. Belief systems in people are no more than a nuance on the idea of the Umwelt. Different belief systems come about because the world is experienced in different ways by different people. Every experience adjusts the filters or the constructs of our interpretation, and subsequent experience is, therefore, filtered or construed in different ways by people with different prior experience. This is why the early experience of a child is so important in its later development, and also why two people can experience exactly the same events or conversation but give different accounts of it. Now, to go back to explain the basic philosophical position with an example that shows how in dialogue we can construct miniature transient systems of understanding and belief as mechanisms of negotiating social power. So I say to you, the weather is nice today, and that's because I want to go out. And you say, it looks like rain, because you want to stay in. I say, appealing to a trusted source, the forecast is good, and you say, they usually get it wrong, undermining the credibility of the source and diluting the power of my position. So I say, if we go out, we can take umbrellas. This shifts on the surface to a new frame of reference, i.e. a set of beliefs about umbrellas that applies regardless of the state of the weather, and acknowledging the shared understanding, our shared Umwelt, if you like, that we're not talking about the weather per se. This shift also changes the power dynamics by requiring a counter-argument in this new mini-system of beliefs. The truth of the statement relies on our shared acceptance of the possibility of umbrellas and that they protect us from the rain based on our quasi-scientific observations of the way the world works and logical inferences such that taking umbrellas entails us having access to them. You say, I don't feel like going out, presenting a belief that you have privileged access to, making it difficult to challenge. And I say, yes you do, and we laugh. Because it's a joke based on my unknowability of your state of mind, and possibly by implication of anything else, thereby introducing skepticism as a new frame of reference. Well, all that was primarily for the benefit of Marcus in relation to reference 1 and reference 2. You'll find all the references in the comment section below. If you now imagine the above conversation starting with something like, women by their nature are hypergamous, it might help in seeing where I'm coming from in these postings.